Hey guys, what's up? And thanks for tuning back into the channel, man. Just got home last night late, like at midnight, from the Bassmaster Open at Lake Pickwick. Leaving tomorrow for the Toyota Series tournament at Lake Dardanelle. And I just wanted to try to squeeze in a tip at any time that I can here. Time's sort of a premium right now. So got a really good one for you guys today. You guys know that have watched my videos that jigs are one of my favorite baits, and we're going to be doing a lot of stuff on jigs. I mean, it's going to be moving forward. It's just going to be never ending because there's so many variables to them, so many different times and applications for them. But today in the tip I'm going to give you guys real quick is I'm going to basically break down what I classify the different jig classifications are as far as, not all jigs are created the same, and there's a handful of them here. Actually, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 7 of them here that basically I consider different categories of jigs, and I'm going to go over each one of them briefly. I'll do more videos in the future as far as details on them, but what I want to do here is I want to show you guys the 6 or 7 jig categories that I use for all my jig fishing and give you just a brief explanation to cover it, to sort of, give you guys an idea of what we're going to be having moving forward. One other thing, if you guys are ever interested in some of these jigs I'm talking about and you want to order them to Tackle Warehouse, please, if you want to, it'd be much appreciated if you use the Fish the Moment Tackle Warehouse link. I'll include in the description. And if you'd like, it really helps support Fish the Moment channel, what Johnny and I are doing, and my channel as well. So let's get into this a little bit here. But man, I just love jig fishing. It was one of the first techniques I really got into when I was serious about bass fishing in lakes down at Table Rock Lake. I remember there was a little tackle store in Joplin, Missouri there, and a friend of mine named Gene Piercy, who's a hunting guide now, he used to run the store back in the late 1970s, for 1980, no later than that. And they'd have, excuse me, we had these jigs there. They had them for sale called Bass Snapper jigs. They were live rubber jigs. And I'd go in there and buy a few jigs and a couple of jars of black Uncle Josh pork frogs. And that's where my love for jigs started in that situation here. So anyway, let's get into it. I'm going to go over the categories here, what I'm talking about here. The first jig I want to talk about is the flipping jig. Flipping jigs, like I said, are just basically what they're called for. They're made for pitching and flipping, heavy cover. And they're basically characterized by, they got a stiff hook in them, really beefy, larger diameter hook, fairly stiff weed guard, that allows you to trim it. This one hasn't been trimmed. I always trim them up, to be able to get through that heavy cover. And it's got some type of a sort of like a combo head that's good for wood and rock both. And I always like the turned eye on it. I just like the way the jig falls better with the turned eye than the straight eye. But in this situation here, when I'm using a flipping jig, it's usually pitching it around some type of cover, docks, bushes, laydowns, whatever, grass, whatever the targets is. And I'm usually using heavier line, anywhere between 17-pound fluorocarbon up to 25 or 30-pound test fluorocarbon, and even some situations braided line if I'm using like a 1-ounce jig. That's the flipping jig profile. The next jig we're talking about would be a casting jig. Now the casting jig setup, it's a little bit different. Usually you've got a little smaller hook on it, a little bit lighter wire on it. This one flexes a little bit. It's still a stiff hook, but it's a little lighter wire. Same weed guard that can be trimmed down, and it's sort of got the same type of head. It's very similar, but the main difference in this particular jig, on a casting jig, is the wire diameter. And this is designed for casting in deeper water. And it's designed for a multitude of trailers. I like to use like a twin tail trailer on these sometimes, Super Chunk Junior, that type of stuff, smaller profile, designed for like casting it on rocky bluffs, steep banks, maybe even points, deep water casting jig. This type of category jig doesn't get a lot of fishing anymore. It seems like football heads have taken it over. But I really like this type of jig if I'm casting it to steep banks and bluffs and working it down like to 25 or 30 foot and hopping it. That's still a category that I use a lot. Next one, football head jigs. Football head jigs, if you guys watch all of Johnny's stuff on Fish the Moment, he is football jig master. He's came out with his own dual offshore football head jig that's available through Tackle Warehouse. Been an awesome seller now. Football head jigs are different. They got a lot of different hook styles on them, but again, it's usually more of a wire hook. It's not like it's, you know, thin wire, but it's not a flipping hook. It's a wire that's designed to easily penetrate the fish's mouth. Most football head jigs got a little bit softer weed guard, but the big key on a football head jig is the football head on it. And the football head with the turned eye, this bait comes through rocks really good like this. It doesn't hang up very good. Designed to be dragged on the bottom. And it's one of the top big bass lures out there. Football head jig has become a staple for offshore anglers as far as fishing those deeper water areas. Okay, the next one we'll talk about, let's talk about this is a Finesse jig. This is a Finesse casting jig. And this jig, it's got a heavy head, it's got a wire guard. This is made by Jewel Bait Company. And it's got a wire hook on it. This is a fairly, you can see, you can bend that hook out a little bit. And the key on this particular thing, this is designed for lighter line, like anywhere between 8 to 12 pound test, like a Zoom little critter cross, some type of a small trailer. This is a compact jig profile that's designed to be fished, again, in deeper water, steeper banks, points, that type of stuff. I mean, it's just a really good finesse clear water jig. And coupled that up here with, this is like the sister version of it. This is actually like the original, what's called the Aikens jig. This is the true Finesse jig right here. So you can see it's quite a bit different. You've got the fairly small hook on it, like I said. You've got lead on the shank that it enables the jig to fall more horizontally. Ball head with the turned eye. And this is a true Finesse jig. This is the one you use with just a little bitty Zoom critter crawl on it, maybe a little bit of a twin tail. I usually tie this with a live rubber skirt and fishing it on 8 to 10 pound test line. One of my favorite jig setups for fishing around docks. And like I said, we'll go into the specifics on these jigs a lot more at a later time. Okay, two more. The next one is very similar to the Aikens jig, but this would be, and let me take the skirt off so you can see it a little bit better. This would be the Finesse, was what I would call is a Finesse flipping jig. It's very similar to a flipping jig in the fact that the hook on it, it's small but it's stiff. It's a little bit beefier hook on it, but it still has the ball head on it. And it's like a beefed up Aikens jig. Here's the Aikens Finesse jig. Here's the flipping jig next to it. This right here is one of my workhorse jigs. I can pitch and flip this in heavier cover, bushes, docks, laydowns, that type of stuff. And I can use it on heavier line. I can use it up to 17, 20 pound test line. And I'm using, again, the small trailers like the Super Chunk Junior, small salty chunks, small trailers on it, short skirt. And what it does, this gives me the ability to have a power finesse approach. I'm still fishing it in off-colored water, dirty water, heavy cover, heavy line, but it's a smaller profile. And sometimes, here's the regular flipping jig, they just want that smaller profile, like when they're feeding on crawdads or stuff like that. And the last category we talk about here is the swing head jig, the old, biffle hard head. This is a fish catching son of a gun right here. I consider it still a jig. It's basically they call it a wobble head jig. It's got a football head design, that's pivots like this on the hook that you basically put your soft plastic creature bait on there. And this bait is designed to be dragged along the bottom. Fish is very similar to a football head jig. In fact, football head jig and a swing head jig, you can pretty much mix them in the same type of water. Although the swing head jig, for the most part, works a little bit better in shallower water, and you can use a wide variety of trailers on it. So anyway, guys, that's just the basic overview of jig profiles. The ones that I just showed you here, this encompasses 95% of my jig fishing, some type of element on this. And like I said, we're going to go into a lot more detail in the future. I'll break down every single jig and give you, lots of details on how, when, where, trailers, setup, all that type of stuff at some point. So anyway, just a quick tip before we get ready to another tournament here. Thanks for tuning in again. Much appreciated, guys. If you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't. Much appreciated. Still 60% of you guys out there are not subscribed to the channel, so it's free and easy, man. You can unsubscribe at any time you want, but it really helps support the channel out if you could do that. So hope you guys are doing well. We'll talk later. See you.